Okay, we're going to get started. My name is Brian Manning. I'm the Communications Manager for Circle Surrogacy. Thank you for joining our online information session for U.S. intended parents called Exploring Surrogacy Options. Tonight on our panel we have Alicia Abdullah, who is a social worker here at Circle Surrogacy, followed by Dean Hutcherson, who is an attorney here at Circle Surrogacy. We also have Jenny Denoff, who is a program manager as well as an experienced surrogate. And finally, James Steele, who is a parent through our program. Just a brief overview of what we're going to be covering tonight. We'll talk a little bit about Circle Surrogacy's history and background. We'll explain the difference between gestational surrogacy and gestational surrogacy with egg donation, or GSED. We'll talk about the surrogacy process and our program options. We'll cover legal work, costs, and insurance. We'll hear from a surrogate as well as an intended parent. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. As you probably know already, you can listen in by phone or using your computer speakers. You should know that you're on mute currently, but if you have any questions throughout the course of the information session, you're welcome to type them into that questions pane on the right there, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. We're also going to be recording this webinar, and we'll email it to you afterwards. So I'm going to pass it off to Alicia, who will get started.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Before I get started talking about Circle, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit. So I began my role at Circle immediately following my master's program for clinical social work. The majority of my training was done at a major teaching hospital here in Boston. And prior to my experience in social work, I worked as a paralegal at a large international law firm working in international arbitration. And I've also worked as a paralegal for a number of years for a local estate planning attorney. So here at Circle, I work as a clinical social worker primarily with the surrogate population, doing screening and matching. So I screen potential carriers to evaluate their candidacy in becoming a gestational surrogate. And then once approved, I prepare them for a surrogacy journey with intended parents and match them with intended parents. And then we also, the social work team, myself included, provides clinical or emotional support to a caseload of gestational carriers matched with intended parents, starting from the first month of their match, monthly through 2 months postpartum, including after the delivery. And then I also part-time get to work with prospective intended parents in consultations, so perhaps I'll have the opportunity to meet with some of you on this webinar at a later date. So the first slide here talks a little bit about the history of Circle. We're one of the oldest and largest surrogacy agencies in the world. John Weltman, who is our president and founder, is recognized worldwide as an expert in reproductive law, including surrogacy and gay parenting. John began surrogacy legal work in 1992 and went on to establish Circle in 1995. And he himself is a father through surrogacy. He and his husband have 2 boys, both in college. Why Circle Surrogacy? So these are some of the highlights of our program that we wanted to share with you tonight. The first one being that we have nearly 100% success rates, and we actually have over 900 births to date, which is pretty impressive. We offer an unlimited IVF program with some of our IVF clinics, and if any of you are interested in having a consultation after this webinar, we can talk more about that in detail. We offer unlimited matching with surrogates and egg donors. So if at a point in your journey you do require a rematch with a surrogate or a donor, that's something that's included in the cost that you would pay as a part of your agency fee. We have an international expertise, and we work with intended parents from all backgrounds, cultural and ethnic. We also work with HIV-positive intended parents through the SPAR program, which is run out of Bedford Labs in Massachusetts, and it's run by Dr. Ann Kiesling, who's been running this program for over 10 years, really well-known, a great program that we're happy to partner with. Circle places an emphasis on known egg donations. And certainly the choice is up to the intended parent if they do require an egg donor. However, through the years that we have been running these programs, we found that it is really a great thing for both the intended parents, the children who are born through surrogacy, and the egg donor herself to remain in touch with one another once the journey has ended. And we also place an emphasis on relationships. So really a relationship between the intended parent and the surrogate during the course of the journey. And that's something that you'll hear throughout the course of this webinar, the importance of that relationship. In terms of support throughout the process, this really is in relation to both the intended parent and the surrogate. So there's consistent contact between the intended parents and someone called a program manager and program coordinator who we'll talk about during this webinar. And that's the main point of contact for intended parents from day one through the delivery. So you do have a main point of contact here at all times. And we also support the surrogate as well, both the program coordinator and manager being in touch with her, as well as her support social worker on a monthly basis throughout the journey. And we do focus on long-term planning of your journey as well. So working with Circle means you're working with a full-service agency. So we have a social work department, accounting department, legal department, and program coordinators. And they work together to ensure that your journey is moving forward, and we're getting you to that end result of a happy, healthy baby or baby. So this next slide talks a little bit about the three components of a surrogacy journey, which I always talk about in consultation with intended parents. We found that these are really important to keep in mind moving forward. So the first would be communication. Communication with your surrogate, again, emphasizing that relationship-based model, being in touch at least once a week during the course of the journey, ideally voice contact, and also being in communication with us as the agency. We're here to support you along the way, answer questions. So communication really important. Also trust, trusting your surrogate, knowing that she has gone through a healthy pregnancy and delivery in the past before becoming a surrogate, and that she's knowledgeable about this process. And also trusting us as the agency. Again, that guidance is important. We want you to be successful and have a healthy baby at the end of this journey. The last important component, which may perhaps be the most difficult, letting go of control of the process and really acknowledging that it's a human process. The surrogate and egg donor, obviously, involved in this process as people, and so are you. So we really want to acknowledge that, and again, kind of make ourselves as an agency available to you during the course of the journey as you need us for support. So this slide talks a little bit about our two surrogacy programs, gestational surrogacy versus gestational surrogacy with egg donation. So depending on your circumstance, either one would be applicable to your situation. Gestational surrogacy, where you provide all of the needed biology to create embryos, so sperm and egg. You require the assistance of a gestational surrogate to carry your baby. And you're matching with a gestational surrogate that meets your legal, psychological, and emotional needs. The second program being gestational surrogacy with egg donation. So this is for intended parents who, in addition to a carrier, also need an egg donor. So you would select an egg donor from our network of egg donor agencies and clinics, and then from that point go on to match with a gestational surrogate that meets your legal, psychological, and emotional needs. This slide talks a little bit about the surrogacy process and kind of the steps entailed. And again, in a consultation, we would have the opportunity to go a bit more in depth about all these steps. But as a basic overview, step one, consulting with us. That entails a 2.5-hour consultation where you would meet with a social worker and an attorney and cover all the applicable subjects here that we're discussing tonight, again in more detail, and talking a little bit about your particular situation. Once you decide to join on with us, we will welcome you, and you will be introduced to two separate teams. The program coordination team, who I mentioned earlier, kind of serving as like a case management role, and they are available to you from day one till the delivery. Jenny, who is one of our program managers, and on the webinar tonight will talk a bit more about her role. The intended parent support team is another team that you will be introduced to when you first sign on, and you'll have an opportunity to have a call with a member of that team. It's made up of Circle staff with a social work or psychology background. And basically, the call that you have with this individual will be to discuss your support system, coping skills, and other topics that focus on communication and pace of the surrogacy journey. So the primary point of contact through the journey will be the program coordinator. The intended parent support team member will remain available should you feel the need for additional support or guidance during the process. So number 3, clinic choice. Some intended parents come to us already established with an IVF clinic. Others are not, and they request recommendations. I mentioned earlier some of the IVF clinics that we do work with offer unlimited IVF packages, so for a flat rate, that cost would cover your screenings, the donor screenings, surrogate screenings, unlimited IVF cycles, egg retrievals, embryo creation. And again, in consultation, we can discuss more in detail about that. So that would be your next choice, your next step rather. And a main reason why we have you do it in this order, the clinic first, is so that you can have your medical screenings complete and out of the way before you match with the donor and surrogate. And something that I will mention about the surrogate screening process, a portion of her screening entails having her medical records reviewed by an IVF doctor before she's pre-approved. So having a clinic selected and in place makes that process a lot smoother. Number 4, egg donor selection. So again, some intended parents who join us require an egg donor, others do not. In the events that you do, you will have an opportunity to go onto our website or one of our partner sites and search for a donor, go through the matching process with her, and then from there go on to contracts and medical screening. And I will talk a little bit later in the webinar about the egg donor selection piece. Number 5, surrogate matching. So while you are working on finding a clinic and an egg donor if needed, our social work team is hard at work screening surrogate applicants and preparing them for a journey with you. So just a little bit of the basics of the screening process. A woman would go online, fill out an application to become a surrogate with us. If she passes the application phase, she moves on to more of the paperwork phase, signing an authorization allowing us to run a criminal background check on her and everyone over the age of 18 in the home. We also run a financial check or bankruptcy check. She signs an authorization allowing us to collect her medical records directly from her OBGYN from her previous pregnancies, which we send to your IVF doctor for pre-approval. And she also goes on to meet with one of our social workers, where we do a psychosocial assessment of her and her primary support person, covering topics such as background information, relationship history, pregnancy history, support system, and current lifestyle. From there, if she passes our social work screen, she goes on to meet with our psychologist, who will test her using the MMPI or PAI, both psychological measures often used in assisted reproductive medicine. And once she passes the psychological testing, she's approved and ready for matching with you. The matching process is also overseen by the legal team. Dean Hutchinson, who is the Director of Legal Services, assists the social workers with that. And if she's legally a good fit for you, insurance-wise as well, and personality fit, we will present her to you. The last piece is journey coordination, which is something that I think Jenny will speak a little bit about tonight.
So all you, Jenny.
Thanks, Lisa. Yep, thank you. My name's Jenny Denhoff. I'm a program manager here at Circle. I'm also an experienced surrogate. Carried twins for a couple from New York a few years ago, which I look forward to telling you more about here in just a bit. As Alicia pointed out, once you have signed on with Circle, one of the first people you're going to be connected with is your program manager. We're really proud of our new team approach, which means that you'll have not one but two people always working on your case. This means that you're going to have a manager who is not only going to welcome you when you first sign on, but then someone who will be working to make sure everything's happening in a timely fashion. There are a lot of moving parts with this process, including insurance and clinics and legal work and things like that. So your manager is going to make sure that those things are taking place. You're also going to have a coordinator on your case who is going to work closely with you and your surrogate and donor if needed to take care of the day-to-day coordination, connecting you with the appropriate parties so that we can get all these items in place. Another thing that you're going to find your coordinator doing is travel, connecting your surrogate and donor for travel to and from the clinics. We'll make sure that your surrogate and donor payments are taken care of. And when it gets to the point in the pregnancy where your surrogate is closer to delivery, we're also going to be reaching out to the hospital and making sure that we have answered any questions that the hospital may have about you preparing for that delivery. And we also have a standard list of questions that we ask or that we go over with the hospital to make sure that we've got answers to the questions that we often have. We share the answers to those questions with both you and the surrogate so that you're prepared and know what to expect when it comes time for delivery. When it comes time to, going back a little bit, when it comes time to welcome your surrogate and donor, we will do the same with them, just as we did with you. Welcome them and make sure they know the process, just like you did. We'll walk them through all those steps as well. In terms of our surrogates, Brian, my slides are just a little bit behind, so let me know if I need to cover anything that I missed.
I think you're in good shape. Can you see the Circle Surrogate slide now?
I'm on the surrogate's picture, one of our beautiful surrogates.
It should be there in just a second.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. We're really proud at Circle of our high standards, and this is something that we talk about a lot. We get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications of women who are wanting to become a surrogate, but we place those standards high for everyone's protection and accept only 2 to 3% of the applicants who apply. One of the things that we're really making sure of is that these women whose primary motivation for becoming a surrogate is simply to help others. This helps reduce some of the concerns that people have regarding, is a surrogate doing this for the money only? That's a big concern I know a lot of our intended parents have. A couple of the requirements that we have are listed here, and Alicia hit on some of them, but just to kind of review, each clinic has their own set of guidelines in terms of BMI. We make sure that we are meeting those guidelines at a minimum. The age requirement of 21 to 41 years old, that we make sure that she's already given birth to at least one healthy child. I think that this is a way that we can help ensure that she's physically, emotionally, and mentally prepared to carry a baby and knows what it would be like, or can imagine at least what it would be like to do that for someone else, for you. She's gone through the psychological screening that Alicia touched on, and she's been approved at least by, we have one of our IVF physicians will approve the records of all of our surrogates that come through. In addition, we'll run her medical records by your IVF clinic, your doctor, to make sure that she's medically approved by your physician. Another thing we're taking a look at is making sure that she lives in a surrogate-friendly state. Each state's rules, regulations, laws regarding surrogacy can be a little different, and so we're making sure that those that she's living in a state that is surrogate friendly. The support of family and friends is an important piece that I know our social workers spend a lot of time on, so that you can rest assured that your surrogate has the support of her family and friends. And then the obvious, making sure she is drug-free, cigarette-free, no alcohol abuse, things like that. Just, I think, a standard healthy individual is what we're looking for. So the next, hopefully you guys can all see it, the next slide should be my story. These are some pictures that bring back some very fond memories for me. A few years ago, my next door neighbor, actually, her doctor suggested she was going to either need to look into adoption or surrogacy as a way to expand her family. And I'm not sure how serious she was, but we sat on her front porch talking about it, and she said, "Jenny, do you want to be my surrogate?" And I kind of chuckled at first. Surrogacy was something I had never given any thought to, but I sat and thought about it for a minute and just thought, I'll bet that's something I could do. I've had easy pregnancies. My family is complete, and emotionally I felt like it was something I could do. So we agreed to both do some research and see what it would entail. As I began my research, I absolutely fell in love with the idea of carrying a baby for someone. And I think more than anything else, for me, the thought that I would get to live the rest of my life knowing that I could help someone have a family or expand their family was huge. You know, family for all of us is the most important piece, and I really, like I said, fell in love with the idea of being able to do that for someone. Unfortunately, my neighbor and her husband decided not to go through with surrogacy. I was so sad for her, but I was also a little sad for myself. It was really something I decided I wanted to do. So what I chose to do was to do some more research and look into agencies. And I came upon Circle and was immediately impressed with the details, the things that they had thought of that I hadn't. So I decided to fill out an application, was contacted the very next day. And 2 weeks later, I was introduced to the two gentlemen you see in these pictures from New York, and they let me know right away they hoped to have twins. And as soon as I got over the initial shock of the thought of carrying twins, I was on board with that plan. So we transferred 2 embryos, and on our first transfer, both embryos stuck and decided to stick around. And over the course of the months, you can see those babies found a very happy home in my belly there, and we had a wonderful journey. It was relatively complication-free, which we're so thankful for, and we delivered the 2 babies there, a baby boy and a baby girl, in November 2011. So the twins are now 3 years old, and their daddies are very happy and very busy and loving life. That's a little bit about my story and where I come from. And I know that we're going to have time for questions. So if you have any questions, I truly am an open book. Feel free to ask me anything you'd like.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was great.
Okay, this is Alicia again. I want to talk a little bit about the egg donor matching and selection. And before I kind of jump into the slides, like Jenny said, we will address questions at the end. So if you have questions for Jenny or questions for any of us, I know Dean's going to be speaking in a minute, as well as one of our previous intended parents who's now a parent. Through our program, you'll have an opportunity to ask all of us all the questions that you have. We're looking forward to it. So this slide here, our egg donors, talks a little bit about Circle's requirements for egg donors, women who apply with our agency to become donors. They must be between the ages of 20 and 29 with a body mass index or BMI no higher than 28 or 30. They need to have a healthy family history, and there's a questionnaire that they will fill out when applying that's pretty extensive that goes over all this information that they are required to fill out. No use of illegal drugs or cigarettes or alcohol abuse, again, pretty standard. And they need to have a minimum of a high school degree. I think there's varying levels of education that you will find in the egg donor population, but at a very minimum, they need to have a high school diploma or degree. So this slide shows kind of excerpts from our website in terms of choosing an egg donor. So that first box at the top allows you to input matching criteria or selection criteria, hair color, height, age, etc., so that you can kind of whittle down the donors that we have on our full site. I think we have around 300 donors.
We're closer to like 340, I think.
Okay, so around anywhere from 300 to 340 donors on our site that you have the opportunity to look through. And it's just as simple as going on the website and creating a profile or a login rather with your email address and a password, and you can access all of our donors. The box below with the donor image and information shows you pictures of each donor, a little bit of information about them, birth date, height, weight, etc. You have the opportunity, if you want to save that donor or include her as your favorite. There's an option along that side panel that you'll see where you can have a running total of favorites and also compare donors as well. This slide talks a little bit about matching with the donor and the types of egg donation that is available to you. So the first one would be known donation. Circle as an agency stands out from other egg donor agencies in its ability to offer known egg donation. With known egg donation, you can meet the intended parent and vice versa with the egg donor and exchange contact information. And you also have the option, if you desire, for your egg donor later on to meet your child. Some intended parents feel like this is really important for them so that their child can fully understand their birth story and how they came to be. So that is certainly an option that you can select. Semi-known donation is another option where egg donors and intended parents exchange demographic information and have the options to have contact via Skype, telephone, or at the fertility clinic, perhaps at the donor's medical screening or at the egg retrieval. There is no exchange of last names, however, or identifying information kind of beyond that first meeting. And then the last option would be anonymous donation. So this involves no contact between the egg donor and the intended parents. The egg donor contract lists first names only, and all information is exchanged through us. Our egg donors agree to keep us informed of all changes in their health and to provide us with updated contact information. So while you may not have that information, we would. And if you ever needed it in an emergency or some other reason, we would have it here available. But that would be the third option of anonymous donation. And Circle does promote known donation. However, you are the intended parents, and you get to pick whichever is the best for you and most comfortable for you. So I will hand it off to Dean, who will talk about legal aspects of surrogacy.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone, for joining and staying on. So I'll give you a quick background on myself before I begin. As Alicia said earlier, I'm the Director of Legal Services here at Circle. I've been indirectly or directly, really, with Circle my entire 11-plus year legal career. I started as a law clerk for Circle Surrogacy and for John Weltman for his private legal practice as well over 11 years ago. I spent a year in that position, then worked at the law firm John was a partner at, and Circle used to be located inside of for the following 6 years, mainly doing general litigation work, but also assisting Circle during that time period with pre-birth orders and contracts and things of that nature. About 4 years ago, I took a position inside of Circle's legal department, mainly assisting with the legal matching with surrogates as well as the legal work to establish parental rights. and about a year ago now I took the position of Director of Legal here, which pretty much doing the same things I've always done, except now I manage the whole process from start to finish, from matching parents with surrogates to helping with the contracts to helping, assisting with setting up the legal work here or where the surrogate is delivering, as well as the legal work at home for the parents. So at Circle, we have pretty much a fully staffed law firm. There are 8 licensed attorneys on staff. John, our president, as you mentioned, has been in this field of law for well over 20 years. He had both his children through surrogacy. Our COO, Scott Buckley, has been with Circle the same 11-plus year span I've been here. Jean Marie, who helps with our contract drafting and negotiating, has been at Circle over 7 years. And Bruce Hale, who's more in our parent outreach program, but is also a licensed attorney, has been here since he was in law school for the last 4 years or so. Jessica, who was my law clerk and is now an attorney, recently passed the bar exam, has been with Circle since her first month of law school, and then we have a couple. Our law clerk is actually a licensed attorney, and we have a woman who works off that. So combined, there's well over 50 years of legal experience in this field, where all of us have spent the majority, if not all of our careers, in this assisted reproductive technology field of law. The law that's really most important when you're doing surrogacy is the law where the surrogate will deliver the child, even if she lives in state A but plans to deliver in state B. It's state B's parentage laws that will take effect. So when we're matching you and when we're looking at a surrogate, we're looking usually not only where she lives, just in case there was a delivery, but really where the delivery occurs, because that's going to be the state that grants your parentage rights as well as creates birth certificates and things like that. You can almost work in every state in the nation minus 6 places. They're listed here. Washington State has a prohibition on compensated surrogacy. Washington, D.C. has a same prohibition on compensated surrogacy, although it appears they will soon change that law and have new law that will allow it. Nebraska has both bad case law and a bad statute. Michigan as well has a statute prohibiting surrogacy as well as case law that bans it. New York also has a very bad statute prohibiting surrogacy. However, we've helped assist with some of the parties that have advanced legislation in the state that's now before their House and Senate, which hopefully will pass in the next couple of years. And same thing with New Jersey. New Jersey has case law banning surrogacy, and they also passed a wonderful surrogacy statute about 2.5 years ago now. But the Governor Christie, had vetoed it back then, and hopefully someday it'll resurrect. Sometimes the intended parent's home state and/or the state where the IVF occurs can apply in some cases. And I'll give you an example. California, the way their statute is drafted, if any portion of the surrogacy contract has any action in California, whether the parents live there, whether the baby's born there, whether the IVF was done there, or if one of the parties simply goes to California to sign their contract, you can use California law to establish parentage rights. And also where this helps is certain same-sex couples, if they want to do what's called a second parent adoption, sometimes wherever their home state is, they can have the child in the surrogate state do some type of legal work to grant one parent rights and then come home and do a second parent adoption. So different laws come into play in different areas, but usually the most important, again, is where the child is delivered. And also, if you do take the next step to have a consultation, what I'll go over is really in detail the specific legal plan for you as a couple or you as a single, what we would do, how we would match you, what states are best, and what I think is the best legal work. So every one of our clients will have a specific legal plan in place prior to ever being matched with a surrogate, so we make sure it can work. So this is a slide about kind of our main goals that we have as a legal team here. So when you sign on with Circle as a client, not only are we going to help you with the coordination, but we're your licensed attorney throughout this process. So we're going to represent you in every stage and look out for your best interest. The first major goal, what we say, is to secure the intended parent's parentage rights. It's obviously the most important goal in a surrogacy journey, to make sure you're the parent 100% on this process. This is done through properly matching you in a state where surrogacy is legal and there's no issues. properly negotiating and drafting your contracts with your surrogate and your donor to make sure they comply with all the state law as well as fully protect you, and then managing that legal work at the end to just establish your rights in the best, sound, and most efficient manner. The second major goal we say is to make the pregnancy your pregnancy, and what we mean by that is through the contract negotiation with the surrogate is to add provisions and to add forms and different things where even though your surrogate is carrying the child, it is your child, so you'll have all the decision-making rights throughout the pregnancy. And then the last kind of goal in this process is to limit your liabilities, and that's not to make you nervous that there's some lawsuit waiting out there for you. It's more of every surrogate's going to have certain requests in the contract, and we just want to make sure when we're drafting and negotiating that contract that we fully protect you, that we set caps on certain numbers, and just when you sign that dotted line at the end, you know the worst case scenario of what can happen. The process itself from a legal standpoint is really divided into three major stages. At first is the matching stage, and as Alicia went through, there's a very thorough screening process, but where legal gets involved is right at the end when we preliminary match couples with surrogates, and then we make sure legally they work. And what we're trying to do is make sure, number one, with a surrogate state where she either lives or is going to deliver is fine for surrogacy and there's no issues. And number two, it works with whatever your specific requirements are. And what I mean by that is some intended parents want a pre-birth order that establishes both parents' rights, and whether they're heterosexual or same-sex, or using a donor or not using a donor, each state's going to have different requirements, so we want to make sure we're matching with a surrogate where not only it's legal to do surrogacy, but whatever specifically you want the end game to look like, we can do that in that state. The next stage after you've agreed to match with both a donor and or a carrier is the contract stage. And as I said earlier, we represent you in this process, so we're going to draft the contracts first. We're going to send them out to you to review and then set up a time to go over it with you to make sure you're okay with all the language and see if you have any changes. And the surrogate and or the donor will have their own separate counsel as well. So we're going to negotiate the contract on your behalf with an attorney who represents each of them. The final legal stage is the actual legal work at the end to establish your parental rights. We're licensed in 3 states, 2 of which you can do surrogacy. So if you happen to be matched with a surrogate in Massachusetts or California, we tend to do all the legal work. Otherwise, if you're in one of the other 38-some-odd states where surrogacy is widely practiced, we're going to engage a local expert on your behalf, someone we've worked with hundreds of times in the past usually, introduce you to them via email or through a call, and then monitor that relationship and make sure everything's happening in an efficient manner and make sure all the legal work is correct, etc. So, and the other thing is if you need to do work when you get to your home state, we can also assist in that process as well. Many different options here at Circle. As Alicia went through, but I'll go through quick. We have what's called unlimited IVF. So with some of our IVF agencies that we work with, a lot of our IVF clinics we work with a lot, they have programs where you can have unlimited creation and recreation of embryos until you have a live child for one set price. So the caps are cost. Same with our unlimited matching plan, as Alicia said. Circle's fee is the same whether it takes you 1 surrogate, 1 donor, and 1 transfer to get pregnant. If it takes you 3 surrogates, 2 donors, and 15 transfers to get pregnant, you won't pay Circle any extra money to find you those donors and those carriers. You won't pay Circle to draft new legal contracts. You won't even pay the carrier or the egg donor's attorneys to review their contracts, because we're going to take it out of that first payment you make to us, so we know that you won't have to pay any extra money if you're having a hard journey. Again, there's gestational surrogacy with donor, without donor. Some IVF clinics offer frozen egg bank programs where they actually have eggs available that instead of paying the whole IVF process to retrieve eggs, there's already eggs on frozen where you can just do a sperm transfer to their, create embryos with those eggs and pay for it. And we also have just egg donation only at Circle. So we have a separate egg donation company here at Circle where you don't need a surrogate, you just need an egg donor. We can assist with that as well. The cost, very tough in a general setting like this where I don't know each individual's plans to go over the cost, but they're going to range anywhere as low as $65,000 to as high as $100,000, not inclusive of IVF and medical expenses and insurance. It really depends on each person's specific needs, whether you need a donor and a carrier, whether you just need egg donation. But if you do want to look, the website is down at the bottom. You can go to the cost page and kind of fill out what you need and get an idea. I mean, for the full GS with egg donation, you're usually in the $140,000 range. Without egg donor, you can take about $20,000 to $30,000 off that in cost. But again, it's much better if you want to take that next step, review it on the page, and then set up a consultation to go over in depth what you would need. Very new this year, and a lot of intended parents have taken advantage of. We were able to secure financing with a healthcare lending company over the last year for couples that want that, to start quicker and use some type of financing in place. The plan's very specific to you again, but as low as $2,000 loans, as high as $100,000 loans, terms up to 84 months, interest rates as low as 6%, and it's a very easy process to apply. You can, again, also can look at it right on our website. There's a link to it and can make the application, but it's a new way, an exciting way for intended parents who need that extra little help to get over the hump to start a process. Insurance is also an important piece of the process. Again, it's very individualized to the people, but from your own perspective, what you want to look at is your own insurance policy from a dependent coverage standpoint to make sure that you have coverage outside of your home state, because most likely your surrogate is going to be from a different state, and you want to make sure your insurance will cover the child or children to be born. And then from a surrogate standpoint, there's many different options. You can sometimes match with a surrogate who has her own insurance. There's the ability to purchase private insurance plans through Obamacare for surrogates that will cover surrogacy, as well as the ability to purchase plans backed by Lloyd's of London specific for surrogacy. But all of this, we're going to assist you in this process once you sign with us and working with us, and when you get matched with a carrier, we're going to make sure all the right insurance is in place. One thing we do require at Circle is a life insurance policy for the surrogate that you put in place. It's a surrogacy-based life insurance and gets put in place at pregnancy. Very low cost, but it's really just to protect all the parties in case something were to happen during pregnancy. So again, as we said before we switch over to James, if after tonight and you want to take that next step and have a private consultation, we do offer free consultations about 2.5 hours. We can do them over Skype, phone, or in person. We travel around the country to different places usually. When you check out our website, you can see where we are. We're in New York a lot, sometimes Chicago, Atlanta. But if you want to meet in person, but otherwise Skype is very easy. We also do at least one weekend a month, one Saturday, where we do Skype consultations as well. So if a weekend works better, you'll talk to both the social worker and the legal person over the call, and go. You can ask questions that you'd rather keep more private in those smaller meetings. If you'd like to do so, again, go to our website or contact Bruce Hale. His email is right here. So with that said, we'll introduce James, who is a recently new parent through Circle. Baby girl Hadley, born about 3 months ago, and he'll talk to you about his experience and the whole process.
Great, thank you. First, it's really interesting hearing this whole presentation now that I have a 3-month-old. Everything is exactly as they said. I don't think I really thought about it since then because I'm not sleeping a ton yet. But with one little exception to our particular journey, it's exactly as they said, and it's kind of neat to see all that. So for our story in particular, my husband and I just knew that we wanted kids, and I kind of thought we'd adopt, and he thought we should have our own. So we did some research, a lot of research actually, and a lot of what I read pointed to Circle, and we happened to live in Boston at the time, so we went to one of the consultations and just decided to go with it. You know, they've been in business for a while, quite a while, and I'm a lawyer, so I sort of looked to avoid risk, and I thought if they're still around, I don't know how this works. I don't know a thing about it, but they do. So we decided to sign up. So we did in the summer of 2013. We signed the contract and filled out the matching application. And as Alicia showed you, that it's a little bit before you get your surrogate, and in that, your carrier, and in the meantime, you find your egg donor and your fertility clinic, and we plan to just do everything as expected. Well, we've completed our application or our profile on a Friday, and we had our carrier on Tuesday, which was amazing and awesome. And we loved her, she and her husband and her 4 kids, but that sort of challenged our plan a little bit, or what we thought the plan was, in terms of lining those other things up. But we were matched with this woman, this family. Basically, they come as a package in Kansas. We had a Skype call with them and just loved them. They just were genuine people. They loved their kids, and our carrier just wanted to do this for a family that wanted children. So we were excited about that and hoped to move the rest of the plan along quickly so she didn't get disappointed with the delay. We did have a bit of trouble landing an egg donor, and that's just because I think a lot of the egg donors, based on where they are in their lives, there are things that come up. We had our first donor agreed to work with us, but then decided she was getting married and got a new job, and it wasn't a good time. Another one that agreed to work with us decided to train for a marathon. One that we did a video chat with the doctor that we were using, decided she probably wasn't a very good match. So we went through, I think, 11 different donors, and it was really nobody's, so you couldn't put any blame anywhere. It's just sort of the way that it worked. But our journey coordinator thought of someone who had been a previous donor with Circle, and she, as it turns out, lived in Boston as well. It's a known donation. We did a video chat with her. We haven't actually met her, even though she lives nearby. And she was perfect. She was ready to go, and everybody flew to Los Angeles. So we were living in Boston. Our donor was in Boston, and our carrier in Kansas. And at different times, we all flew to Los Angeles to meet with the fertility clinic and the doctor there, who was very fun. And we did the retrieval, and we had hoped for twins. We were upfront about that from the start because we envision our families with more than one child. And they retrieved the eggs and split them and fertilized the 2 different batches from each, from my husband and from me. And the best embryo from each batch was transferred to the surrogate, and only one took. And after we sort of had that initial bit of disappointment, we quickly made peace with the fact that because this pregnancy was happening in Kansas and we live in Boston, and the potential for increased challenges with multiples, we decided this was probably really a good thing, and just had faith that's the way it was supposed to be. And as you can see from this picture, we were pretty lucky. She's pretty amazing. So the pregnancy went really, really well, and we visited with the surrogate a couple times, and she and her husband came here a couple times, and we flew to Kansas a few days before the baby was due, and the baby was a little less excited to meet us than we were to meet her. So not quite a week late, labor was induced, and the delivery was crazy fast and phenomenal. We were right there the whole time, and that was our little girl. So we were there for a few days in Kansas and flew home to Boston, and it has been great ever since. We've kept in pretty close contact with the surrogate. We just enjoyed she and her husband and their family so much that we haven't really video chatted with them, but we keep in close contact with them, and actually plan to do this again probably fairly soon, which we're pretty excited about. And our surrogate has agreed to work with us again to do this. We weren't really sure if she would want to do it again with with kids, 4 of her own at various ages, but I think luckily because it just went smoothly and we all got along so well, we're excited to do it again. There are a couple things that I was thinking about in this, to talk with you about this, that I sort of wish that I knew before. Because when I went into this, I literally just sort of handed over the control, as Alicia talked about. We just knew that Circle took care of everything. We looked at some agencies that did things in kind of piecemeal, and you could sort of be your own general contractor, and I just didn't want to do that. So there really is this big piece about just sort of giving over control, and we asked the questions that we could think of, and we'd never done this before. So while there were never really any problems, one thing that we sort of didn't do, I don't know why, when everyone meets with the doctor and has their medical screenings, we didn't actually test freezing and thawing sperm. Maybe we're getting personal here, but as it turns out, it became a problem for us, and just by doing that one simple test beforehand, it would have changed our future and how we're going about doing this our next journey, because we didn't know beforehand there were issues around that. So that's something for a simple little thing for intended parents to think about, just to make sure that you do that. It also helped to put aside some extra money. I mean, money's, you got to be prepared for, like anything, for some overages. There are trips that while we knew about all that, it just sort of adds up. So just remember that while there are fees to the agency, there are other things. There are gifts, there are meals, there are your own flights and your own hotels. And if you love your surrogate family as much as we do, then you really want things to go smoothly, and it's just nice to know. It's good to remember to put aside some extra dollars. The one last thing that I'm still amazed at with this whole process is I didn't realize quite how humbling the whole thing would be, and all of the people that we've worked with that just care so much about helping you get a family. I mean, people get paid, but it's not that much. And with the nurses in the hospitals and everyone at Circle and our journey coordinator, I feel like now that we're sort of this part of our journey's coming to a close until we start it up again, I feel like we've lost a friend. I've never even actually met her, but we relied on her even just for encouragement along the way. And you sort of, it's pretty awesome to sit back, and when you look at the whole thing and the people that you worked with and how much what they did to help you build a family is pretty overwhelming. I think that's really it for our journey so far. As you can see, that's Hadley at 3 months, which was a couple weeks ago, and I can't get enough of her. I think that's about it.
Thank you so much, James. That was awesome. At this point, I think we're going to we'll put the consultation information back on the screen, and I know people have been typing in questions over the course of the presentation. We'll take some time to answer them now, and as we're going through them, if you think of anything you want to ask, you can feel free to type that into the questions pane on the right there, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I know we have a bit of a queue right now, so we'll just get started on that.
So the first question says, how long does it take to typically be matched once signed with your agency? It can depend on a couple factors, but it's usually for domestic couples or domestic singles, you're in the 2 to 3, and sometimes singles maybe 4 month range, but it's in that 2 to 3 months usually to match with the surrogate. The next question, do single intended parents have more difficult time matching? I mean, Alicia can speak to it as well because she's from the surrogate side from the screen, but not really. I mean, it might, like I said, it might add an extra month to the match time, but there has never really been an issue. We're going to talk to the surrogates in advance to make sure they're okay with working with single or straight or hetero couples. So it's the person we're first aligning you with, we already know in advance that they're okay with it, but it really hasn't been much of an
Yeah, I would agree with Dean. It's something that we ask her at the very beginning when she applies with us on her initial questionnaire what population she's open to working with. And then once she moves through the pre-screening and screening phases, we continue to discuss it as well. And before we even present a match to her, we would be talking about that. We would be talking about that with her. So we haven't had that come up as an issue in the past.
The next question are, how are payments done? Do I have the entire balance up front? No, so easier in a consultation, or I don't know if when we send a contract, but there's usually 2 payments made to Circle, or not really to Circle, but to your escrow account at Circle. About a little more than a third and a third, and then a separate payment made to your IVF clinic. The first payment made when you sign on is a little over a third. You're then going to choose your clinic, and then the second payment made to Circle on your escrow account, about another third, and that is usually the surrogate fee and or the donor's fee if you need one in the legal work in the state you're in. So it's the payments are structured over time, and even though you could match in 2 to 3 months, you can kind of control that matching time and that second payment if you're not ready to be matched at the moment and extend it. Assuming the Supreme Court makes gay marriage legal throughout the U.S., would this change the legal process? Not specifically. It'll still depend on a state-by-state issue from a parentage perspective. I think it would go in the positive. I'll give you an example. The October non-decision by the Supreme Court, which pretty much legalized same-sex marriage in certain states like Virginia and Utah. Utah always had a great surrogacy statute that only hetero couples could use because it talks about married couples. But however, because that ruling made same-sex marriage legal in Utah, currently now same-sex couples can work under the same statute in Utah and both go on the birth certificate pre-birth. So it definitely will. It'll trend positive. It's been trending positive for that anyway. But I think, yes, it will help, but not 100% across the board. Still, certain states will still, I believe, put up a fight on birth certificate issues. Are there age restrictions for intended parents? Yes, there are. Alicia can do it more because she's in that screening process.
Yeah, so there are age restrictions. I believe if it's a couple that's applying with us, we look at a combined age of not over 120, so both of your ages together. And then with single intended parents, that's also something that we look at. I believe 60 would be the age limit for a single intended parent. And with that, we would also talk a lot about support system and other people in your life available to you both during the journey process and then post-birth as well. So we do look at that.
One question, with twins, how does the process differ in cost? So from a agency and fee perspective, there's going to be no difference in cost. But what twins do is tend to bring in potential cost overages that aren't there with singletons. They're just more likely with twins. And with that is every surrogate usually has a provision in their contract where their fee is heightened by about $5,000 to $7,000 if they get pregnant with twins. Most surrogates, or all surrogates, have a provision if they get put on bed rest during the pregnancy. Again, something more likely with twins than with singletons. Cesarean sections are more likely with twin pregnancies, so there's heightened medical costs as well as heightened costs in your surrogate agreement. So you're not going to pay more to Circle for twins. You're not going to pay more to your IVF clinic to transfer up a multiple embryos, but you do add in potential add-ons that could occur just from the complications of a twin pregnancy. The question about, do you help finding international egg donors? We could guide you towards them. However, from a U.S. IVF standpoint, the IVF all has to be done here. So even if you were to find an international egg donor, they would have to come to the United States to do the process because there are certain FDA guidelines when you're creating embryos. And the FDA would not allow an IVF clinic to import made embryos from abroad unless they were made for that couple. You know, for a hetero couple example, if they made embryos abroad for their own use and they're switching to surrogacy, those can be imported. But if they just simply made embryos abroad with a foreign donor, you cannot bring them into the United States to use them with a surrogate. Question, do you offer legal advice on how to recognize a child in a country outside of the U.S. taking into account local regulations about gay parenting? Yes, so Circle, over about 60% of our client base is international, so we have a lot of experience dealing with different citizenships, different requirements for residency, different requirements for travel. So again, it's something we take into effect when we're matching you to make sure legally the legal work is done to secure your parental rights from both that international as well as the U.S. standpoint, and you'll be able to travel back home. How does Circle view egg donations from family or friends? We've had many clients use family members or friends. The egg donor will still have to go for a screen, and we'd probably give you advice that depending on the age, you want to keep in the same kind of age limits that most egg donor agencies use. But it's okay. We still think they should have legal counsel involved to represent them in the contract phase, et cetera. But we've worked many times with couples using family and friends as egg donors. There's a question, are there clinics in South Florida? And how many times is it advised to travel in the case the clinic is far? I know there is one in Miami area. I'm not sure how much experience we have with them, but I can, if you reach out to us after, I can get you the name. I have a very good contact attorney who down there who works in this field of law, and she'll have contact. I would pick the clinic that you like the best. The surrogate is going to travel once for a screen and once for a transfer, same with the donor, once for a screen and once for retrieval. So they're not going to have to go to the clinic that much, and it doesn't really matter. All of our surrogates usually travel by air to their IVF clinics for the transfers, and it doesn't have any effect on the success rates and things like that.
Actually, James, I don't know, how many times did you travel during your journey?
We went once to the clinic. The donor went twice, and the carrier went twice, and she was monitored locally in Kansas after the transfer.
So there's a question about someone having 2 embryos remaining in a previous IVF cycle. If they were not to work with a GC, what would be the process if you had to make new ones and transfer? So you wouldn't have to lose that carrier if it was only 1 or 2 transfers. Usually your carrier agreement is going to have a certain allotment of how many transfers are there, and it would be known in advance of matching that this is what is available, and then she may, the intended parent may make more, so the carrier will be on board in advance. Usually most contracts have anywhere from 3 to 5, I would say, transfers available, and sometimes surrogates will, up that if they want to stay with the intended parents as well, if there's a mutual. So there wouldn't be much to do other than it would just be in the contract. So the question, my husband and I both live in New York City, and we have a carrier who also lives in New York City. Do you think that would be a legal issue? Yes. I mean, people have done surrogacy in New York and been able to get court orders. Where it becomes an issue is if there is ever a problem arises, between the parties. Do you potentially have issues with parentage rights because the surrogate is living in New York? So we don't use surrogates in New York because of that. There is case law effect where people have gotten pre-birth orders in New York and done surrogacy. It's just, it could cause a problem if there was a relationship breakdown and a surrogate changed her mind or something to that effect because she has a statute that behind her that outlaws surrogacy. So it's potentially risky. There's a question, is there any clinics in Atlanta? I don't know the name offhand. I know there is a big IVF clinic in Atlanta. Close to Atlanta, I know there's a really good one in Charlotte called, the term is REACH, R-E-A-C-H. We've worked successfully many times with them in the past. And I can find out the name as well for the one in Atlanta if you want to email us after. But there's definitely good clinics there. Can you choose physical characteristics of the embryo, such as sex, hair color, etc.? There's a process called PGD, which is where they do embryonic testing for various diseases as well as certain characteristics. I don't know how in-depth the characteristics go. I know you can choose sex because it's pretty simple, but I don't know about eye color, hair color, things like that. I'm going to guess it's probably possible, but probably a better question for the medical professional. You mentioned embryos cannot be sent to the U.S. from abroad. Does the same rule apply for non-fertilized eggs? I'm not 100% sure, but probably because it has more to do with the FDA blood testing and other testing at the time of retrieval than it does about the actual embryo. I think the same thing happens with sperm as well, because I know we've had clients ship sperm from abroad just to get tested, and that's fine, but I don't think they could ship it to get actual, to use in a transfer. But I can find that question out as well. But I'm pretty sure it works for either, that you can't ship it from abroad and use it to transfer. Can the IVF clinic be located in New York? Is one of the questions. Yes, and most IVF, a lot of people use IVF clinics in New York. The issue is that there is a large number of New York IVF clinics that will not do a transfer into a surrogate because they're a little nervous by the surrogacy statute. It shouldn't really affect them, but a lot of New York clinics won't actually do a transfer to a surrogate because of the prohibition on surrogacy in New York. The question is, what is the average annual income of an individual or couple contracting Circle for surrogacy services? We wouldn't have an answer. We don't collect any of that information. So it'd be impossible to give that answer. So we don't collect the information. How many eggs can we collect and store for the future from a single egg donor?
I mean, it really depends on how the retrieval goes. It's possible to retrieve 20 eggs and fertilize them all and only utilize a few for one cycle and get pregnant and then have the remaining frozen for next time. Or, 20 eggs may not be retrieved. It may be closer to 10 or maybe 5. It really just depends on, how her body responds to the medications, how the retrieval itself goes, and then ultimately once the eggs are retrieved, the quality of the embryos that are created afterwards. So it's hard to really predict a specific number unless she's going through the cycle currently and the IVF doctor can give you a better picture, but until you're matched with someone, it's hard to know.
Next question is again about gender selection. As I said earlier, yes, for an added cost with the IVF clinic, there's certain testing they can do on embryos to tell you what the sex is, and it's actually widely used in the U.S. now. Next question, if 2 embryos are implanted and only 1 baby is born, is there a program for couples seeking another child? So currently, the way your contract is set up with Circle, the agreement for services, there is a reduction in certain fees for a second, what's called a sibling journey, if you come back with the same surrogate. Also, because you most likely have embryos already stored, et cetera, the IVF costs are greatly reduced. We've been in contemplation of creating a kind of sibling plan. It's not, hasn't been created as of yet, but right now what it is there's a reduction in prices, et cetera, for a return with the same surrogate or a return with a new surrogate. What is the success rate at Circle for full-term birth over the years? Can you once again describe if there is some type of guaranteed Circle program? I'm not sure I understand that. It's tough to give an overall success rate because it really depends on, so I would say couples working with Circle for both donor and carrier, the success rate is probably close to 100% for live term birth. We have had couples that only wanted to use their own embryos, hetero couples, and will not switch to donor and don't get pregnant. But if couples with gestational surrogacy with egg donation, it's 100%. The guarantee program, so we've kind of got, we used to have what was called the guarantee program, and I believe some of the clinics will still offer it, which was 3 multiple embryo transfers with a certain type of egg donor, and if you weren't successful, you got a lot of the money back from both Circle as well as the IVF clinic. We've gone away from that program because what we really want is our clients to come away with children and not with their money back. So what instead we do is this unlimited rematching and matching. So you pay Circle a one-time fee no matter how many transfers it takes to get pregnant. And we work with different IVF clinics that offer unlimited IVF, which is for one set fee for the IVF clinic. You get all, an egg donation with all the embryos created and all the transfers. And if you run out of embryos, you get a recreation of embryos at no added cost until you actually have a live child. So it's unlimited IVF for one set cost. How many births does Circle do per year? It's rising every year. It's probably going to be over 100 this year. It could be close to 120 a year about. So it's definitely at least 10 a month. As we said earlier, we've had well over 900 children through Circle in our 19-year existence, and really the first 10 years was not a lot of births, so it's really over the last 7 or 8 that it's increased. Is any of the surrogate process fee tax deductible in terms of medical expenses? Yes. So as surrogacy kind of boomed, a lot of people have gone to get tax deductions for it, and in the consultation I go over this. For hetero couples who are doing surrogacy because of infertility issues, there are reported IRS decisions where an entire journey, $96,000 was deductible. In the very least, usually medical procedures and legal proceedings for adoptions or parentage action is deductible, but it's definitely something, usually when I do a consultations, I give the intended parents kind of a bunch of different documents to send to their tax expert. I'm not a tax expert, and I'm not giving full tax advice here, but I can definitely give you information to use with your accountant at the end of the year for them to look at to see what could be deductible. Can I request to be matched with a surrogate who's been a surrogate before? Yes, we have a lot of return surrogates, but it most likely is going to extend your wait time because a lot of our experienced surrogates are coming back to work with their prior intended parents. But we do on occasion have. So I would, if you were to work with us, I would make it a preference, not a requirement, because there may be a wonderful person who fits everything else you want except for that, and you don't want to pass up on that person.
I would also say something about that as well. I think it's important to note that while an experienced surrogate has gone through the process before, she's also coming to this new journey with kind of experiences and expectations from her first set of intended parents. And I think kind of looking at the relationship piece, I think it's just important to note, and keep in mind if that is something that is really important to you. And again, it is a human process, and that certainly comes into play, I think, with every journey. So something just to keep in mind as you consider experience versus first time.
Another question, can Circle match me with a gestational carrier in a state where I can do a pre-birth order and declare the mom at birth of the child without going to adoption? Yes, as long as I know all of this in advance of matching, and it would be part of kind of your matching criteria, we're going to fit everyone's needs and their exact wishes, so very easy to do so. Whether you're a single woman using your own eggs, whether you're using a donor, we can find states that work. Question, me and my husband are a same-sex couple. Do you have any tips on how we should pick which one of us should be the sperm donor? I'm going to have James. I don't know if you want to give any advice on this question.
Sure. I don't know how, other than when you go to the fertility clinic, they will test you, the sperm counts and the mobility of the sperm. And the one thing I sort of mentioned before, we had an issue. One of us has a morphology, which I'd never heard of before, and sperm doesn't. So because of FDA requirements, they take your blood and your sperm at the same time and test you for infectious diseases, freeze your sperm, and then thaw it, and that's how that thawed sperm is used to fertilize the egg. Well, in our case, one of us, when the sperm thaws, it changed shape, and it wasn't any good. So we didn't know that beforehand, so we lost half of our eggs from the retrieval, basically. So that certainly would have either changed the process, or you could do it differently, where you freeze the embryo instead of the sperm. But you would need to find that out, and you would do that with a fertility clinic. So I would definitely talk with a doctor and do the full analysis, and also, your health. And if the goal is to quickly have a healthy baby, I think all of that is part of it. We learned from the doctor that through a urologist as well, that those things matter, and it can help the viability of the embryo, depending on who's healthier in general.
Question, as a gay single male living in Virginia, are there significant obstacles that I should be aware of that may hinder the surrogacy process? None whatsoever. We're going to match you in a state where you're not going to have any issues from that standpoint. So your state doesn't matter as much unless we need to do legal work when you return home, which we wouldn't in that case. Question on, can I get a list of IVF clinics part of your unlimited program? Start success rates heavily influence my top choice. Well, first, I would tell you that START is a wonderful place, but people can kind of send whatever statistics they want to it and can make themselves look better, and not all IVF clinics even are required to submit to START. So I think it's actually better to speak directly to clinics to get their success rate. If you want to know the name of the 3 clinics that offer unlimited that we work with, one is RMA Connecticut. Dr. Leonderis is the doctor's name. Pacific Fertility in Los Angeles, Dr. Vic Sahakian. In the Fertility Center of Las Vegas, Dr. Danishman. I think it's better to speak directly to the doctors on their own success rates and specific, using donors, not using donors, et cetera, to get a better idea than START itself. Do we have male donors? No, we only have Circle Egg Donation has 8 donors, but we can put you in touch with different places to find a sperm donor. Is it better to freeze unfertilized eggs or embryos for future use? It's much better to freeze fertilized embryos because the frozen eggs are not as good as fresh eggs to create embryos with. And don't have as good success rates, whereas frozen embryo now, there's really no differential between frozen and fresh transfer success rates. Are there surrogacies where both egg and sperm donated? Legal issues. There are. We would match you in a state where legally that is allowed, and you can get pre-birth orders establishing both your parental rights. There's no any legal issues because we're going to specifically find states where that is fine. I think it's up to maybe 10 or 11 states now. It used to only be about 3, then it was 6. Now I believe there's about 11 different states where you can match in and get a parentage action prior to birth. How is Texas in terms of gay surrogacy? It depends if you're a single or a married couple or a same-sex couple. Right now, Texas is one of the few states that if the surrogate lives in Texas, they will not change a birth certificate to put 2 fathers on it, even if you do an adoption in another state. We have many gay clients work in Texas, usually international clients or someone who doesn't need, or a single gay parent who doesn't need 2 parents on it. Surrogacy is great in Texas. It's just currently they will not change a birth certificate to add 2 fathers on it. What if you want more than 2 children at once? I'm not sure if you mean from one surrogate or dual surrogacy journeys. We would never advise to implant more than 2 embryos unless we've had consultations with the doctors and it was necessary for a twin or singleton pregnancy. If you mean dual journeys, we've sometimes allowed for staggered journeys where you wait till one surrogate is pregnant and then you can either match or transfer to another surrogate, so the pregnancies themselves are staggered, so you're not having babies being born in different states at different times. Can you please give the contact of egg harvesting clinics in Las Vegas? We'll email it directly to you. The name, again, is Fertility Center of Las Vegas. It's in right outside in Las Vegas. Do the intended parents make the decisions on reductions, i.e. to embryo split? So what we do is your contract with your surrogate, well, you're going to fill out a questionnaire before you join that talks about your feelings on reduction and abortion and termination. The surrogate is going to fill out the same exact questionnaire, and we're going to match you with someone who agrees with you exactly, and we're going to press run those questions. You're going to have those choices in terms of termination, abortion, reduction. From a 100% legal standpoint, I'll tell you, though, if a surrogate ever changed her mind legally, she's going to be more power solely because of her constitutional right to choose. It's why we do our very thorough screening. This issue has never come up with us in the past because when a reduction has been needed, it's been done, or when a termination has been needed. But just from a full disclosure standpoint, legally, a surrogate is going to have a right to, not refuse to terminate or refuse to reduce. There's another question. Can the surrogate live with you during the pregnancy? I'll let Alicia answer it.
There, I think, are various reasons why that's probably not a great idea, and I would be more than happy to speak offline about this a little bit and have a conversation about it and answer questions for sure.
Okay, so those are all the questions we have. We've answered all the ones that have come in. If people have one or two more questions, we can take them. Otherwise, we'll try to wrap this up by 8:30. I want to thank Jenny and James both for joining us tonight, and for all of you for joining us as well. Like I said, we'll hang on the line for a few more minutes in case any one or two more questions trickle in, but otherwise, if you've had your questions answered, you can feel free to sign off at this point.
So we just got the last question. Because I'm European, my partner's American, could the baby have dual citizenship? There should be no reason why not. We would just need to know, which citizenship and match you accordingly. The only thing I could see, if let's say the European is not the biological father, it might be tougher for the child to get that European citizenship. If you have one child and the European is not the biological parent, it might be tougher to transfer in the bio parent or the child's citizenship rights. But very, very common for us to have clients with multiple different citizenship needs and wanting them, the different citizenships for different children, and we've always been able to do so.
Okay, so that wraps things up. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and have a good night.